Hey, everybody, welcome back to Conversations in Ken's Café. I'm, of course, Ken Somerville. Our guest today has been on the History Channel, been interviewed there, has been interviewed all over the place because of Vortex and Vortex Energy. And his name is Dan Shaw. And Dan, how the heck did you get into Vortex Energy to start with?
The origin story. Well, the origin doesn't start with vortexes. It does start with beginning to meditate around age 7. I discovered that if I gazed into a very dim light in a dark room, that was an enjoyable thing to do, and start having psychic experiences. And at age 14, the UFO turned on its lights for me.
Cool.
And I was surprised, but I wasn't too surprised, if you know what I mean. And then at age 21, I had the good fortune to spend some time studying with a channel ascended master and studying about alchemy and physical ascension, physical and planetary ascension. And so a couple of years after that, when I kind of backed in, well, I shouldn't say that. That's not quite right. A couple of years after that, I feel that my guides and angels handed me this information about these sacred places and these maps showing these sacred places, and very often in geometric patterns.
Yeah.
And so when this miraculous confluence of events happened at my darkest hour, as I was getting separated from my wife at the time, 2 young children, I was in Mount Shasta area. I was headed for Lake Tahoe, and the person I was staying with said, "Hey, have you seen how these two are connected?" And again, it's a series of miraculous events flowing out of that. But it turns out that Mount Shasta, Lake Tahoe, and many other mountains and bodies of water form this nearly perfect circle around the Grand Tetons.
Right.
19 significant mountains and bodies of water, each one the most significant in its region. So knowing that, Mount Shasta, Lake Tahoe at the periphery, Crater Lake is another halfway point, Sedona, Lake Louise, you can draw that circle yourself. So I saw that map of that pattern, that geometric pattern, which you see behind me on the wall. It's a little hard to see from here, perhaps, but that's, I ended up publishing that. I call it the EarthStar North America. It shows this vast circle around the Grand Tetons. So when I was in Mount Shasta and I was headed for Lake Tahoe, that information was delivered to me. I was able to see, wow, this is a powerful alchemical tool. This geomancy, it's a subset of alchemy. All the same principles and rules apply. And so I grasped at that like a life raft, and it's carried me some 40 years since then.
Well, it's explained a lot of things that didn't have an explanation before.
Well, say more. What do you mean?
Well, when you, let's put it this way, when you move from just looking at things physically and you look at things energetically and you take that step, a lot of things that have happened in your past life experience, can start to make sense all of a sudden. You can look at your past and go, okay, that's why this happened. That's why I was taken in this direction. And on your trip and your friend pointing these things out, it's that guide that, all of a sudden shows up at that particular point in your life that takes you to that next step, that, removes the blinders from your eyes. And all of a sudden you're going, well, when I was 15 and this and this and this happened, well, now that makes sense. Have you found that at all?
I do. I do find that there's this interwoven thread that without that divorce, this never would have happened.
Yeah.
So I feel deeply that I have an agreement with these beyond physical beings who are perhaps more than physical. Let's say I have an agreement to share this material. So thank you for giving me this platform. I want to invite folks to contact me, and so that I can send them a link to download a free ebook I've written, which is called Stonehenge Gardening Tips Using Earth Energies in Your Garden. So that if you email me at energy@vortexmaps.com, then I'll be able to send you a link to download that Stonehenge Gardening Tips book.
Cool. Now, I just have the vortexmaps.com up on the bottom, guys. So is that your just a normal email on that they could send that to you?
Right. Energy, ENERGY @vortexmaps.com.
Okay.
And if you go to vortexmaps.com, you'll see my phone number right at the top there, and you can give me a call.
Cool. And that's one of the things I love is people that use their real name, their real image, and are willing to share. You have so many people hiding behind, the image they're portraying, and that's not who they really are. But let's take a look. Like, you've mapped things energetically globally, because you talk about Stonehenge, you talk about, like, on the History Channel, you were talking about the Alaskan vortex. These vortexes have been in existence for a very long time, and you've also studied the ley lines, the energy flow of this planet. How do you relate that to growing a plant? Because I know that there's some animals, like bees, like vortexes, and there's animals that hate vortexes. Uh, there's people that you see a twisted tree in the forest that's going straight up, and then it makes a curve and then goes back up. That's supposedly a vortex. How do we find vortexes? How do we, if I have one in the middle of my garden?
Hold back there.
Right.
That was too many questions at once. Let me untangle that for listeners here. So,
Okay.
So by my definition, I take different researchers take different approaches to Earth energies. And I use the word vortexes a little colloquially, just to refer to places that have Earth energy. People who use the term leys or ley lines are using it also. Often they're using it too broadly, where that's actually a very specific term. So it's useful to kind of begin just to set the stage here. I would say that there's an infinite amount of energy available everywhere, all the time, for physical healing, for psychic opening, and for harmonizing the planet. So infinite amount of energy available everywhere all the time. So it does turn out that it does seem that there are global systems of lines of some kind of energy. We could maybe put a fine point on it and talk about if it's a physical energy, geophysical energy, or some kind of more subtle energy. But just to put kind of my own place in this whole scheme in perspective, I had the good fortune at that time I was describing, when I was just finding out about this pattern around the Grand Tetons, to contact Beth Hagens, who she and Bill Becker back in the 80s put together a version of this global ley line system called the EarthStar Globe. And I was able to reprint it. So I'm the publisher of the EarthStar Globe and this EarthStar North America, which you can see at vortexmaps.com. And I've certainly done a bit of independent research myself. I've now written a number of books on various aspects of the topic. So I try to take as scientific approach as I can. I'm interested in the unity between the geophysical and the biophysical. And I have a degree in geography, for what it's worth. And so I try to bring a rigorous approach to the entire field. And I have my own opinions too. So we might have to, in the conversation, you might have to tease that out, what I think, but compared to what researchers think. But from my perspective now, a vortex is anywhere where the energy is different from the surrounding energy. That's the technical definition of an anomaly. So if you have a magnetic map and it's mostly blue in the lower end of that spectrum, and then there's a spot that's red, high magnetic field, strong magnetic field in whatever way, that's an anomaly. That's a vortex. So then we can argue about, well, what's the effect of this slope of magnetic field on us as we move through it? And now we're talking about the vortex effect. And I like to look at the electricity and the magnetism and the geophysical explanation first before I go farther afield, let's say, into consciousness and metaphysics and tension and that kind of magic. So that's where I'm at. Let's look at the simplest solution there. What's going on with the electricity in the soil? What's going on with the electricity in the water? What's going on with the electricity in the air? Okay, how is that affecting us? Is it affecting us positively right now? Because there's these time cycles. Is it affecting us negatively? How are we affecting it? And how can we intervene if something isn't to our liking? And how are we damaging things unknowingly? And that's my entire pitch. Thanks for listening.
Well, that was way too much information. I'm sure of it.
Did I answer your 5 questions though?
Well, yeah, more than enough. It's amazing, Dan, that our life takes us along on a path. You started meditating very, very young and started getting in tune with the energy that is around us. And I've got a new book, what's it called? A New Science of Heaven by Robert Templer, talking about basically energy, frequency, vibration, but he's talking plasma energy, which I myself call source energy, because it's the source of all the energy around us. It's everywhere. It's between every molecule, is this plasma energy. But that's what we are talking about, is those energy flows. Now, you've done enough studying on different places where these vortexes exist. Scientifically, how does science actually explain these vortexes?
Well, let me start by saying I believe that gardening is one of the highest applications of this science. That as we understand the energies of the earth, we can use them to make the earth more fertile and the cells more alive. So that is, to my mind, one of the intentions of these ancient monuments. And in Stonehenge Gardening Tips, I'm using Stonehenge as a little bit of a poster child, as people do, for all these places. You do find across the globe that many of these ancient monuments do have incredible water features. And there's some evidence that I believe it's the Akapana Pyramid actually had a reservoir at the top where the water would flow through some kind of stone. I'm forgetting now what kind of stone it was to energize the water. And of course, you can look at the incredible agriculture that was going on in and around Lake Titicaca as another example of where there was incredible confluence of what we think of as ancient monuments and agriculture and hydrology, hydraulics. But for your listeners who, I think I like to jump right to the end and get right to the point, and to answer the question, okay, why would there be a global pattern of energy lines? And so the energy lines, to my mind, I think that the whole Earth being a vortex, spinning vortex of its own, it's creating a kind of a fundamental frequency all its own. And the acoustic analogy works very, very well. So if you were to measure the circumference of the Earth, you'd of course find that the equator is wider than when you measure around the poles. When you do measure around the poles, what you find is that in miles, it's a very near exact multiple of 27. Near exact multiple of 27 miles. And so that around the world, you find these harmonics of that fundamental frequency. You find fractions of the polar circumference 54 miles in diameter and multiples of 54. Look where we are, 108, 216, that whole progression there, 432. So if you take a look at some maps, you may find these patterns of circles and half circles that are in these dimensions that are, let's say, harmonic with the fundamental frequency of the earth. And
Mhm.
so it would seem that some of these are going to be beneficial for life, and some are going to be not beneficial. And we can go into that a little deeper. But the as you place your garden, and as you orient your garden, and as you locate it to other features on the landscape and in the broader region, you're creating energetic connections, and that you can draw
Mhm.
energy from constellations of stars based on how you pattern your garden.
Well, and I know my wife and her grandmother especially, were planted in the series of the moon. You know, I know that we've got a lot of people on our channel that focus on the seasons, how the seasons move, but also we've got some that look at the universe as a whole, in our galaxy, our solar system. Is Jupiter ascending? For doing things like that, because it does change the flow of energy, and that I think is really where we're trying to tap into. And in gardening, they're talking now about redox potential and the potential of the energy flow through the soil. But Silly Lily wanted to ask you a question, Dan. Oh, wrong one because it moved. There we go. So, Dan, would you say that vortex equals energy, frequency, vibration?
Thanks for calling that out. I just picked that up out of my periphery, but I can't keep up with the conversation going on in the chat at the same time, though. But I would say exactly that.
Mm-hmm.
Where this is why the acoustic analogy is so strong for what's going on with vortexes, and I could take it just one more level deep to see how well it applies. If we think of a mountain peak, such
Mm-hmm.
as Mount Shasta, let's say, we can think of that as, well, first of all, that change of elevation creates a change in electrical potential. We all know how lightning strikes highest point, and so that peak is going to be subject to more lightning strikes than, let's say, the valley.
Right.
Right. So uh, now if we have, let's say, another mountain peak, and it's a certain distance away, and it's also got kind of energetically, if we can see with energetic eyes, we have two peaks, and they're just both projecting some energy. We have kind of a waveform being created. It's
Mm-hmm.
not very stable, but if you find an equilateral triangle of such points, you could almost think of it as being a kind of an antenna, broadcast antenna. All of a sudden
Yeah.
now you've got a very stable waveform, because you've got these three that are in resonance effectively. They're at the
Yeah.
they're equidistant. Yeah. So now when you have this kind of energy pattern, you can think of it as like ripples in a pond from a stone. You have a sine wave, and where these waves are interacting, you have two kinds of interference. You have constructive interference and you have destructive interference. In other words, additive and subtractive interference. So in some places, those waves are going to be doubled. In some places, they're going to cancel out. And some third places, they're going to be the inverse, right, of that waveform. So,
Mm-hmm.
so you effectively, just by having these energetic waves, you've got three different types of vortexes.
Yeah.
And you could use the terms positive, neutral, and negative, yin, yang, and neutral, however you want to
Mm-hmm.
categorize that, so that you've got this energetic earth that's like a ball of violin string vibrating, and
Mm-hmm.
there's just almost an infinite number of interference patterns. So there's global patterns, and then you'll find smaller patterns as well, such as the North America one we talked about.
Mm-hmm. Have you looked into fractals at all and how fractals work at all?
Little bit. And what we're talking about is these 54-mile diameter
Mhm.
circles as they appear on a map. And that, a model is only as good as it is useful. When we talk about ley lines, what we should really be thinking about is we've got these undulating waves of energy that are expanding and contracting. They're actually conscious and divine, and they influence us, and we influence them. And they're maybe 100 miles wide. They're not necessarily straight lines. Ley lines are kind of a specific case, and they've got the historically has to do with intervisible natural and built features on the landscape. You can see from one to the other. There's numerous of them within a very short distance, and it's rifle straight. But there's other kinds of energy lines. There's these equilateral triangles I mentioned, and then 4, 5, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 pointed stars, overlapping circles, shapes of faces and animals. These are all kinds of visionary maps, but I like to focus on one kind of visionary map, which is these vortex maps. There's about 12 different kinds of visionary maps to my mind, but let's talk about like applications on the ground in the garden.
Okay.
We can go there. So your readers, listeners are probably familiar with electroculture to some extent, probably more than I am. I've got so much to learn from your show, which I just discovered the other day. But if folks are applying electroculture, are they following some recipe book, or are they dowsing, or how are they building these electrical devices? How are they getting their measurements? Can I ask that question?
A lot of the people, because there's different ways and methodologies. If you look back into our playlist, Harvest Harmonics is a company. It's built by an Indian doctor for human body first, and then he went into plants. But it's the frequencies that he is using that are interchangeable with the health of the plant. Like, your heart has a specific frequency of health in your body, and our plants have a specific frequency for health in their bodies, in their cell structures. And a lot of people are using that. They're putting the charge through water when they're spraying their fields to promote the proper frequency. It's like doing an energy healing where you're using the quantum touch method, which is basically breath work, raising your vibration up to a certain level. And then when you're touching the other person, their energy has to come up to your energy. And that's how the healing is. A lot of people are looking at that type of a methodology, putting energy or a higher level of energy into their garden. On Quatmoc Villa's last round with Leighton Morrison, he was talking about using Bokashi, biochar, putting it in corners of his garden, putting an iron rod or not copper rod in, and connecting it. And you're talking about the points and the different points in his methodology. He's putting a large mass in the corners and then smaller masses along the string line, I guess you could say, around the garden, and connecting them and using that to generate and draw the energy in and to put it into the soil. Everything needs energy to multiply itself, whether that's us. We use so much energy in a day, but in our soils, the biology that's building all these cells need that energy. This is another method they're using to draw the energy in, to power the biology to build the cells. And then the other one that I'm familiar with is basically a frequency generator that they're putting on top of the soil itself, and generating music, a heartbeat, etc., to put frequency into the soil for promoting growth that way, and it amazingly works really really well.
Wow. Well, you are blowing me away with these techniques. These are brilliant. Let me if I can just kind of reflect how that fits into just the little bit of work that I've done in and around. So I did have I'm reminded of the sonic bloom,
Hmm.
which was a nutrient that was sprayed for foliar feeding onto plants, along with the sound of bird song to open up the stoma of the plant.
Stomata.
The stomata? Okay, thank
Yeah.
you. So thank you. So what the heck was Dan's last name? Do you remember the Sonic Bloom guy? So he also was named Dan. So
Okay.
so what you're describing there is just the highest level alchemy. You're describing the bokashi, which I'm thinking I mean, it's kind of vinegary. It's acidic. Is
It,
bokashi have kind of
it's
an acid?
it's a fermentation.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so then the biochar, it sounds as though you're setting up a kind of a carbon battery going on. And then
Yep.
you've got the circuitry going on. And so it's a beautiful thing. And the question is, uh, for me, okay, I've arrived on a site now. How do I know what's going on in the ground? Right? I mean, there's electrical currents going on naturally in the ground, and those are
Hmm.
cycling throughout the day. And unless I have, a magnetometer, some kinds of sensing equipment, I'm just there with my own human body sensing, and I shouldn't say just. But we come into a place, and hopefully we take off our shoes. We make that good electrical connection to the ground, and
Yep.
then if we bring ourselves to stillness, hopefully we can be aware, we can be proprioceptive, we can be aware of the sensations in our body, which maybe would pass unnoticed otherwise. And as you were describing that stuff, my face tingles. That's one of the way I get the energy. And so,
Yeah.
my face was tingling, and it's easy to just like feel a little tingle or whatever and scratch. But if you're aware, like, everybody senses these energies in different ways. If you're sensing them without, let's say, dowsing rod or pendulum, then you might be feeling it as a little tingle, or you might be feeling it as heat or cold. And I find that people are very able to learn how to sense these kind of subtle energies
Hmm.
between their own hands, or between themselves and another person, or between themselves and a tree or the earth, just in a matter of just a few minutes of teaching how to go about doing that. And it's the same, I think, for seeing auras.
Hmm.
And
Well, if you have ever walked into a room where two people were arguing, having a really a good fight, and you walk into that, and you go, "Oh my god!" Like, okay, I want to get out of here. People don't realize they're feeling this energy and these energy waves all the time around them, reacting to them naturally without even understanding that they're there. But that's where people like you, Dan, are opening up people's eyes that this energy and these vortexes actually exist, and we can interact with them. I'm really interested in how you're teaching people how to sense these things, because most people think it's the woo woo science or magic or witchcraft or anything, but it's just the natural energy that surrounds us.
there really is a science behind what I call earth magic. And the the geophysical, the electromagnetic field in which we are immersed is
Mm-hmm.
super dynamic, and people generally don't give it any consideration whatsoever.
Yep.
We're living in this turbulent electromagnetic sea. All our cells are electromagnetic. There's the various time cycles going on. There are certainly electrical currents in the soil, depending on how much moisture and metal, and we're either insulated from that soil or we're grounded to it. As I'm sure
Mm-hmm.
you're familiar with earthing, which
Yep.
is essentially the science of making sure that our cells are electrically grounded to the earth. So as we move through this turbulent electromagnetic field, we're not separate from it. We're being influenced by it, and there's a unity between ourselves and the planetary energy. So we're also influencing it, and turns out, of course, what visionaries have been telling us forever, we are finding that there's so much science behind it. So let's say you're in a spot where there's quartz crystal in the ground, which is very, there's a lot of quartz crystal going on in the earth, and that's piezoelectric, and that's under pressure, and those pressures are changing with the tides. Now you've got this electrical current in the earth, and it's got its tidal cycle, basically this sine wave, and so you're coming through, and you're either affecting that energy or you're being affected by it, or both. And your plants, how are you going to tap into that? How are you going to map that out? Are you going to have, go back to the same place every day at the same time, and take, say, some kind of electrical readings? How are we going to tap into our inner knowing, and what because we know so much more than we understand.
Well, you had mentioned bird song, and that's one of the things. And I know my wife Lily has always said that in her belief system from a very young child, in the spring when the birds started singing, it activated the trees to start, coming back and waking up for springtime. And that's really a lot of what we're doing when we're talking about this stuff, guys, is we're activating and energizing the life that's available in the cells, which is your biology. They need energy, and any way we can energize them, the cycle is faster. It's like putting high grade fuel in your vehicle or putting dirty gas in your vehicle. One's going to perform much better. That's where we need this energy. Remember, our physical forms are just a bag of biology, just like a tree is a bag of biology. The energetic, and that's what we're talking about today, is a major part of that life cycle, of that flow. When we can track that energy of, like when I talked about Paul Stamets putting, a nuclear isotope by a tree in the forest, and miles away, his students registering it as it's put in, that's that energy that has no time. It has no distance. It's instantaneous communication in our entire planet. And it's that energy that Dan has really been playing with and looking at the vortexes. Now, I'm going to get back to the clip you did on the History Channel, where you had the interviewers stand up and you put the magnetic disc, the vortex disc, and saw a height difference on camera. How the hell do you guys explain that one, Dan? Come on, give me the explanation.
Okay, I don't have all the answers. Do not have all the answers, but I will tell you that my friend and co-author Nick Nelson spent his whole life studying magnets, more than 15 years working at these tourist attractions, which are genuine magnetic anomalies. Yep. First, the one in Oregon, the Oregon Vortex, then the one in Montana, the Montana Vortex. I worked several seasons there with him. So he's made a real clear study of two things: magnets and these places, which are seemingly magnetic anomalies. And now I'm kind of just as astounded as anybody else, and have my own level, even though I've seen miracles, have my own level of disbelief about this. But Nick has recently retired and shown me how he manipulates a magnet in order to create a kind of an effect that you do see at these tourist attractions around the country. I think there's 8 of them that are currently operating: the Mystery Spot in Santa Cruz, and 2 in Michigan, and the Mystery Hill in North Carolina, for example. And one of the demonstrations of this vortex or mystery spot, it involves something which cannot be explained away as an optical illusion. We're all familiar with the forced perspective and the crooked shack. We know what that is. It's not that. And so that when you have two people standing on a perfectly demonstrably level platform to observers from any angle, you can clearly see that when two people change places, there's an apparent change of height.
Yeah.
And I've done this demonstrations hundreds of times myself as a tour guide at the Montana Vortex. It does seem to vary over time. It seems that there's a 6.5 minute cycle. You can actually watch it yourself looking at a spot on the wall as you go up and down over time at certain locations, it seems. So this device involves, it's the size of a pendant. Nick's shown me how to put the thing together. Does not make sense, but by using a washer and a strong neodymium magnet, he's able to lock in a kind of a magnetic field, a vortex field. He's got numerous different methods for doing it. Some don't involve washers, some don't involve magnets, in fact. But I market this device. It's called the Golden Vortex. You can see it at vortexmaps.com. And I don't understand how it works, but sensitives and psychics love it. And people find it's designed for healing symptoms. It's guaranteed for 60 days. I almost never get returns. The last return I got was because the guy said it was too strong. But there's two different types of Golden Vortex device. And when you stand on either side of this device and you look at someone across the space of a couple of feet and you compare your eye level, when you switch places, it replicates this natural vortex effect, and you can visibly see that people appear to change heights. And I can't explain it, but I've got a sight level that I'm applying to the principle, and I'm putting them together myself for kind of the first time, and I'm trying to feel absolutely confident that I'm sending out ones that, first of all, they work. Some magnets apparently don't make the grade, and they've got to be selected out before I ship them out the door. So sure enough, I mean, I'm able to build these devices. The technology's pretty straightforward, but apparently, magnets are more complex than we thought. Who knew?
Well, yeah, or actually, we've known this for thousands of years, because you wouldn't get the pyramids, you wouldn't get Esther Island, you wouldn't get Stonehenge without knowing these things. We're just relearning this now and how to manipulate that energy, and that's what you're doing. You're manipulating the energy to be able to show people that these energies exist. Now, I wanted to just mention one thing is all of the conspiracy theories that I used to talk about 30, 40 years ago have all come scientifically true now. And this is just a new one that people can start looking at. But scientifically, we are going to figure out how this stuff works as the instrumentation comes, as that what you're doing, creating these mini vortexes, is going to have the science backing. Maybe you take it into Kirlian photography where they can see the energy field, and maybe there's a real change in the energy field. Maybe it's in our eyes, but yet on camera they don't have our physical sensation, so it's got to be something that's happening outside of our physical representation to be able to show up on the camera. But I'm wondering, like, is it stretching the cells? It's just that it's so fascinating to me what you're talking about, Dan, that it's just, it makes me giggle inside that these things are finally being recognized as reality for more than just the few people that have been stuffed into a corner and going, oh, you're weird, you just go sit over in the corner over there. Now it's becoming more mainstream because of you, Dan, and because of your friend that has been doing and following this for decades, we are matching that up now with not just our physical, but with our energetic in the gardens, using different methodologies, using, what's the term I'm looking for? Little discs that they're making, organite, or I think it's organite. People creating pyramids out of PVC that they're putting over their bed so they can get that drawing of energy. I've seen the best one I saw was actually a bunch of guys in, I think it was Utah, put up a rod. I think it was about 300 meters in the air. They were drawing the atmospheric energy and charging supercapacitors with them. The energy is there. It's always been there. It's our learning how to grasp it again, because we knew how to do this, and use it for ourselves. Now, your disc, are people buying those just to put under their pillow at night, or is that something you would put in a garden to help garden growth?
Well, the pendant does have a little hole in the center that you can pour water through if you're, small quantities drinking water. Otherwise, you could potentially tape it to your garden hose, something like that. And I want to give a shout out to my friend Jason Matozo at fractalwater.com, because he's got this exquisite, I think it's a Fibonacci spiral nozzle. He calls it the super imploder, that's combined with some very powerful magnets. And so shout out to fractalwater.com for doing the good gardening work. And my friend Steve Diver on Facebook for suggesting your show to me.
Thank you, Steve. And we'll have to reach out to him, and obviously he needs to come onto the show too, because it's all his fault.
You know what though? Gosh, you just mentioned somebody, Quantum Touch, Richard Gordon. You could reach out to Richard Gordon. He'd come on your show.
Cool. Yeah, I'll have to. I took his course. I still have it on VHS. Okay. That's how long ago I took his course.
What he's doing now is he's doing remote spinal adjustments. So he's he's trying to make inroads on this idea that he can adjust somebody remotely. And I'm certain that he can.
Well, like I said before, there is no distance, space, and time when it comes to energy. You look at quantum entanglement, where they took, I think it was an atom, or I don't know, the wife would remember, but they split it in half, put 7 miles one direction, 7 miles the other direction. And when they manipulated the one, exactly the same thing was happening in the other one, 7 or 14 miles apart. There is no distance between the two when you're talking energetically. It's all connected.
There's no separation.
Yeah.
There's no separation. It's one of the principles of alchemy.
Yeah. And that's a photon. They split a photon in half.
Yeah.
And this is all scientific, guys. Like, I'm not just, pulling this out of my butt. This is actually scientific research. Quantum entanglement, you can look it up. It's that is really what we're talking about, Dan, is that energy, that entanglement of all the energy. And there's focal points, and that's what your vortexes really are, as focal points coming out, like your ley lines, or the ley lines cross. Why is there generally a church built at that juncture? Why was that done? And you look at globally at the ley lines, and you find that most of the crossing points have churches on them. Why did they do that? Why is it exactly there and not 100 feet away? They knew about these energy, and like you said, your face, you feel that on your face. You talked about dowsing, etc. These are ways to track the ley lines, track the energy flow that is around us. Now, do you go out and look for vortexes, Dan, or is that one of the things that you're into?
For sure. That's where I want to be. What we're going for is to be in those places in stillness, in gratitude, in joy, and to infuse the place with that energy, perhaps
Hmm.
to do whatever ceremony and to leave no trace, maybe take a trash bag in with you and take out some trash and connect
Yep.
deeply to experience all the entire electromagnetic spectrum, to listen to
Hmm.
that bird song, to listen to the sound of the crickets, which is going to bring our brain frequencies into harmony, to look at the harmonic proportions, the fractals of nature, and that's going to bring our brain waves into harmony, and to breathe the air, and the air is going to have its electrical properties, and
Hmm.
it's going to have hopefully those good negative ions because we're out in nature, and that's going to be good for us. And then we're going to maybe eat a little wild food or drink a little spring water if that's available to us. And that's going to bring us in resonance with the place.
Hmm. Well,
And mhm,
a, a lot of it is that resonance. Like I lived in British Columbia in up in the mountains for when I was a child, and going out into nature up on the side of the mountain, finding that meadow with that creek or running through it. um, you can really lay in that grass by that creek, and if you're sensitive at all, and I happen to be very sensitive, you can draw that energy in, but you can also just let it flow through. It's that energy, frequency, vibration. I don't need to capture that energy. I just need to become a part of that energy, and it can raise my energy, my frequency, my vibration to a different level where you're starting to see things and feel things. And Dan, I know you've had this experience, because starting at 7 years old, meditating, being able to see, touch, and feel what isn't there to most people. But when you're starting to interact with that energetic plane, that next level of energy that all of us have access to, it's really an eye opening experience, because generally it's opening up your third eye, which is going to show you a whole bunch of different things that you never thought of. You're going to see things walking down the street and go,
you're scaring us. No, don't scare us. It is a
well,
little
I,
scary though, because
yeah.
there's a sense that you have to surrender. There's a certain loss of control because you don't know what you might experience.
Hmm. Well, and the child doesn't have the fear that we do as adults, because as a child, you haven't been told that, oh, that's not possible. Oh, you want to be scared of this, this, and this. A child doesn't have that yet. And a child doesn't need to have that fear. It's like, okay, Dan, if you're walking down New York City and you saw a three-headed alien walking towards you, in New York, that's kind of normal, isn't it? Like, people wouldn't be scared of that, would they?
What you're talking about is called ontological shock.
Hmm.
Stanislav Grof called it spiritual emergency. And it's kind of a fascinating topic. And I talk to people all the time
Hmm.
who feel safe to share with me what it is that occurred to them that they had their break from reality, and then how they integrated that into their life. They have some kind of an emotional breakdown, or were they able to successfully integrate it in their life and enrich their life in some way?
Hmm.
Everybody's different around that, but hopefully, when we have that experience that's the break
Hmm.
from ordinary 3D reality, that we were able to not go into denial about it. It may
Yeah.
take years to integrate it in, to be able to express it to other people. Took me years to begin to talk about my experience seeing these lights of this UFO.
Hmm.
But many, many people do have these various kinds of paranormal experiences, and there's something called the paranormal pledge, where if you could even make up a story that isn't true about, oh, saw a UFO, just as a social experiment to see how many of your friends then open up to you about, whoa, I had this experience as well. So in my position, I'm hearing almost daily about people's experiences, which on the one hand I love, but what I'm really trying to sort out is, where's the intersection of the paranormal with the place?
Yeah. Well, and if you're in the middle of a lake, you're going to have a different experience than if you're in the middle of a plane, because the energy flow is different through the two different mediums, the water in comparison to the soil structure. But I want to just let people, and people might not think I'm a total nutcase, but there's more than our species on this planet, guys. And when you open up and you start to see these things walking down the street, you don't need to fear them, because they've been walking down the street for all of your entire life. They haven't done anything to you, etc. Most entities on our planet have the same moral values that we do, health, happiness, children, love, respect. They're not to be feared as much as people want us to fear them. If you can accept what's there, then it's in that acceptance that you'll raise yourself to that next level. And don't think because everybody else says that is hokey, crazy, you're crazy, that you are, because you're not. They're just not open enough yet to see what you're seeing.
Well, if I may just underscore part of that that's real salient for me, is that reality is far more vast than we can even comprehend. And it is, again, there's a certain sense of loss of control and having to recalibrate, and people can go into denial. So it's not something we want to force on people, but my experience is that the non-physical and metaphysical world, the world beyond the physical, is as real or more real than what we're experiencing here with our limited perception. Nobody would argue that our perception is unlimited. If we look at the animals and we look at the plants, wow, their perception is way more expansive than ours. And so let's look at those plants and animals. They'll tell us a lot about our place. If we can watch the bees or the ants, or how those plants are spiraling, well, that's going to tell us a lot about the energy of the place.
Well, and most people fear what they don't understand. And it's in that understanding that we take the next step in understanding. It's an oxymoron, but we have to take that step to be able to reach the next understanding, to take the next step to reach the next understanding. It's allowing ourselves the freedom within ourselves to take that first step and that second step that's going to be able to progress us into that higher knowledge. There's a lot of stuff, guys, you're hearing out of me today that you've never heard from me before, because I don't talk about it. This is all private stuff.
See what I mean? Paranormal pledge is bringing it out.
Well, it's, are you ready for what I have to say? Because when I go deep, guys, I jump into the rabbit hole, scrape around, I find the wormholes underneath, and I go down those to find these realities. But energy, frequency, vibration is our true heritage. These physical forms, we're here to learn using the attachment to this physical form for me to go out, experience different things, the good, the bad, and the ugly, to take back to the source knowledge, the source energy, who I am, my aura, my essence, my soul, however you want to portray it. But it's just our physical form is here for experience so that we can grow to a higher level energetically and reach that higher level of understanding. And Dan, you have and have had these experiences that are taking you to these higher levels of understanding. And I know you want to talk more about the garden, but I want you to talk with Leighton Morrison, my expert host on soil and soil matters, more about that. Let's keep us on the side of energy a little bit more today,
Oh, sure, sure.
and look at let's look just at Stonehenge. Okay, how much understanding do you have on the energy of Stonehenge, my friend?
Okay, let's talk about Stonehenge. But before we do, I just want
Okay.
to, there's something just, I think to my point that we're all having these shamanic experiences, or maybe striving for them if we're not having
Mm-hmm.
them. Uh, and we all have some resistance to them too, because as we mentioned, they're pretty unlimited and transform everything, and they're a little scary. But we're we're able to tap in and have these experiences in our daily life. And
Mm-hmm.
and it may seem that it's a once in a lifetime thing. It's not. You can sit down and connect with the trees. You can sit down and connect with the earth. And I want to recommend a little article by Montauk Chia, which is called Befriending the Trees. And it's a little rough if you Google it and you come to the website, but I've reformatted it into a document that I'll send along to people when they email me at energy@vortexmaps.com.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now to your question. Remind me.
Stonehenge.
Thank you. Of course. So uh, in Stonehenge gardening tips, what I've done is I've deconstructed Stonehenge in a certain sense and looked at all
Cool.
its different elements, because it's not just a circle of stones. That's the stone part of the name. The henge is a ring and ditch. It's an
Mm.
interrupted ring and ditch. In other words, it's not continuous, but it's not a defensive ring and ditch. If it were, we think that the ditch would be on the outside. It's not. It's on the inside, which is pretty
Mm.
unusual for these features. So in Stonehenge gardening tips, I look at that ring and ditch as a kind of a filter, almost like a polarizing filter for light. Or you could think of it as a harbor. So where outside of your garden, there's a lot of chaotic energy, let's say, here's a
Mhm.
roadway. It's at one point, it's kind of pointed towards your property. Let's say over here, there's, I don't know, cell tower, whatever it is. Over here, railroad tracks, whatever it is. You've got some disruptive chaotic energies around. It's a hodgepodge. So you build a little ring and ditch of any size. And what that's going to do is it's going to filter out that chaotic energy. It's going to be like a boat inside of a harbor. There's going to be less waves,
Mm.
let's say. And it may act as a kind of a capacitor where energy is going to build up, build up, build up until whoosh, then it discharges. So you can create a more harmonious acoustic environment by building it, because, it is, if it's big enough, it'll act as kind of an acoustic barrier. And symbolically, it doesn't have to be the size of Stonehenge. It can be any size. It could be in
Yeah.
a flower pot. And so you're going to use energetic materials. You're going to go carefully pick your stones from, someplace in Wales, miles away, and go to great lengths to choose a certain location, because it's going to be in alignment with other locations. In fact, multiple alignments. It's going to be part of a pair of circles. It's going to connect to Grovely Castle this way and Old Sarum that way, and to Avebury, whatever it is. So it's a part of a pattern in the landscape, and
Yeah.
probably a geometric pattern, and it's broadcasting energies, and it's creating these kind of stable waveforms. And then it's on this chalk plane, and as rainwater trickles through the chalk, electrical charges are exchanged. And then you've created these microclimates by creating this kind of ring and ditch. And then the stones, they probably have these electrical properties which were spoiled when parts of it were rebuilt with rebar and cement. But presumably at one time it acted as a kind of a particle accelerator, and those stones actually had a directionality about it and kind of a spin. And strangely, it's in a similar shape to modern particle accelerators. And then you have these stones and the trilithon, so you have compression, and the stones had quartz crystal in them, and that's piezoelectric. So there are electrical properties to that thing. And then you carefully measure the interior of that ring. There's multiple rings, but that interior ring of stone seems to have concave surfaces. So the acoustics in there are very, very interesting, and kind of on and on. So that we can derive that at least one of the purposes of that ancient monument and many others was really to make the landscape more fertile. A lot of these monuments, they put up a monument, bam, lightning strike. Well, we know that nitrogen is precious for agriculture, and it's actually a limited resource. We're mining back guano for nitrogen, right? It's also a pollutant because, it gets shed into our watersheds, etc. But it's not a renewable resource, is it? Well, it turns out it is, because that lightning strike is going to break nitrogen out of the atmosphere, and it's going to fall around, and it's actually going to make the land around that monument more fertile. So come on, science behind earth magic.
Well, and that's the thing. There is more and more science coming out on this type of a usage, I guess, or an understanding would be a better term, on how this does work together with the natural cycle. Like you look at the Schumann resonance, and that's your lightning strikes is what forms your Schumann resonance that they can track, is the lightning coming down and that energy flow. You're getting more of it in different areas than you would say in a desert. You're going to get more up on the top of Mount Shasta because of the heights, because of the metals that exist there. Do you think that your little vortex that you're selling, if I put that, say, in the middle of my garden, do you think that is going to draw more energy to that? Or, do I need multiples of that to draw more energy? Like, how big is my structure need to be? Like you say, I don't need to build Stonehenge, obviously, but what size do I want to have in my Zen garden, in my pavilion in the center? I want to sit and meditate. What size do I need to create for bringing that energy in?
Oh gosh, multi-part question again. So
I know I'm bad for that.
You're great at that. So let's just start with this, because not everybody's heard of Schumann resonance. So if I can, I just give you my approach to it and see how it jives with your experience. So between the between the Earth and the electrically charged part of the atmosphere, which is called the ionosphere, there is a cavity. And like any cavity, it's kind of an acoustic cavity, just like the inside of a violin. It's got certain properties based on its dimensions, and it resonates at a certain frequency. So there's some variability, of course, in where is the ionosphere, for a couple of different reasons, natural and man-made. The ionosphere does have a little bit of variability, but between the ionosphere and the Earth, there's acoustic cavity which resonates at a certain frequency and its harmonics. And so the fundamental frequency of the Schumann resonance seems to be about 7.83, which, wow, that matches beautifully with our heart frequencies and our brain frequencies. Okay, so that's my kind of elevator pitch for Schumann frequency. Now, I will say there's some talk out there on the internet that the Schumann frequency is increasing. And I'm going to say that may be true on an energetic level, but there is no, to my mind, no scientific support that that's happening on a physical level. So fight me on that. Okay. So that's the Schumann resonance. Now, the second part of your question, the device. Okay. So your garden is already a vortex. You don't really need my vortex device, but it'd be nice if you could identify what is the energetic properties of my garden. Where is that vortex? Where's the center? Where's the edge? What's it doing at the center? What's it doing at the edge? Is it 27 feet in diameter? Where do I build my my earth ring, my mini Stonehenge, all
Yeah.
those things. Okay, so the little device, you can use it to energize water. There's plenty of other ways to energize water. You can sing to it. You can stir it clockwise and then counterclockwise. You can pour it through a flow form. And what we find is that many of these ancient monuments seem to be doing essentially just exactly similar same things. So there's all kinds of technologies that are available to you. You can take a piece of copper pipe and put it in a glass of water and play music to that. So
Mm-hmm.
Essentially all the things that we do to our human body, whether it's like acupuncture or aromatherapy or whatever it is, there's a correlate that is a way that we can treat the earth. So, you've had a tree that's damaged. Let's think about giving it a little rescue remedy.
Mm-hmm.
There's this lovely microcosm and macrocosm.
Well, and we, especially on this channel, understand that it's a whole synergistic thing that is actually happening, whether it's, our singing to ourselves or our singing to the biology in the soil. All of it is actually connected, in frequency, in resonance. We talk about energy, frequency, vibration, what Nikola Tesla said, and many more before him saying the same things. It's when we can take that water like Dan is drinking there, and we can energize that. And, there's so many different ways to do it. Just, looking at it and speaking words of love to it is going to raise the energy. One of the scientific things that people may have heard of from the past is 3 magnets wrapped around your fuel line in your car actually saves you 25% in your fuel cost because of how the magnetics work to compress the molecules in the fuel, and it burns better and you don't use as much. But we can do that on the water. We can do that in all of this stuff. Look at Andy Lopez, and crystals and gem elixirs, making the gem elixirs specifically for a frequency to help someone in their health. This is the kind of things that we're talking about. Like I've talked about having the big funnel, putting marbles in it and pouring my drinking water through that a few times, literally changing the taste of the water. This is how we can do things. The harvest harmonics, changing the frequency in the water, heightening that frequency. Quantum touch, raising the vibration. These, I think, is what a lot of these, monuments, whether it's Stonehenge, whether it's the pyramids, whether it's Easter Island, a lot of these were for the energetic that we have lost in our history, and we're just coming back into. And Dan, you're bringing a lot of this out, and a lot of the people, and like I was saying before we did the show, I want to bring you on with Stefan Burns, our resident geophysicist, because I think you guys would have an amazing conversation, way better than what I'm able to articulate on, the knowledge base that he has as the geophysicist following all of this. But anyway, Dan, we're just over an hour. Do you want to keep going, or do you want to shut down for today and come back with a couple of the other hosts?
Oh gosh, well, my appetite is almost insatiable. I wanted to suggest that the hoofbeat of the large animals, the buffalo, the elephant, it turns out the elephant has sensory organs in its feet for feeling ultra low frequency vibrations, such as earthquakes. I don't know if you saw this video that's going around the internet that heard of elephants responding in like attack formation, circling and all facing out after the earthquake. In any
I
case,
didn't see that.
These the elephants are amazing. They actually have special sensors in their feet for sensing these ultra low frequency vibrations. Speaking of animals that are more sensitive than us. But where I was going with this was that the pounding of the hoofs on the plains was a kind of healing for the earth. And that, of course, sadly gone.
Mm-hmm.
The buffalo. The drum
Well,
is a
yeah.
similar thing. And when we drum inside of these acoustic structures, let's say such as Stonehenge, then or some kind of a church, we're putting that healing frequency vibration into the earth in a very real way.
Well, we can't help ourselves. If we're singing, we're putting that energy out. But focusing it is what you're really talking about, and it's that in focusing that energy that we can manipulate that plasma, that cosmic energy, however you want to phrase it. We can manipulate that energy that is around us if we allow ourselves to and believe that we can. Like, I like to tell people, anything is possible. There isn't anything that is impossible. It might not be happening on this planet in this phase of reality, but somewhere it's happening. If you can think it, it's happening somewhere. It's being able to take that energy and believe you can, step onto air to reach the higher part, pick that apple off that tree without needing a ladder. It is possible because you can manipulate that energy into steps. And I know somebody that it has happened to, where in their meditation, they were starting to step up into the air. I think they were on about the third step and they realized what they were doing and came crashing down because it was like, what? But this is things that happen. And you had mentioned crystals, and there's some guys over in Maine, the Meehan family, the barn in Maine. They actually took crystals, powdered them, put them into a grow bed, and when they were done and dad and mom had went upstairs to go to bed, mom's going, can you ask the boys to turn that generator off? Because it was so noisy, she could feel and sense the vibration, and there was no generator on. It was the crystals that they had put into the soil. So that's how energetic we can have in our daily lives if we allow ourselves to go there.
I'll say one more thing about Stonehenge and frequency and sound, if I may, and that is that the ancient name of Stonehenge was Choir of the Giants.
Okay.
And the earth does depend on us as not separate from it to put in those loving frequencies.
Yeah.
And
well, I don't know about your heart, Dan, but my heart, I try to all day long put out love as a frequency, because it's not just my physical form, it's my energetic form that is interacting in that quantum entanglement around my entire planet, around my entire universe. I have an influence that I can create with that loving energy. And I'm fighting against all those people that are negative, dang it, because they're bringing down the energy, and I'm trying to push it back up. But the more of us that actually understand this, Dan, the better all of us are going to be, because darkness can't stand the light, and that loving energy is bringing the light, and the lower vibrations are repressed and held at bay so we can live in that higher energetic field. And that's what's happening globally right now as people awaken. And COVID actually helped us because it made people stop and think and see and open their eyes and see the manipulation that has been going on this planet. Advertising marketing, it's all been designed to hold us back, to force us to buy different products that is all just about the money, and they're not good for us, where we're trying to break that cycle. And Dan, I think your books that you've written are part of that fracturing of the cycle of knowledge to where we're going to be able to take it to that next level of understanding.
Wow. Well, thank you for saying that. If I could say that I believe our purpose here is to facilitate, to make easy personal and planetary ascension, that our consciousness and the earth, they're not separate. We're going through a kind of a birth, and birth can be traumatic and painful, but it doesn't have to be traumatic and painful. We can ease that transition, and transitions are scary, but they don't have to be scary. They can be super fluid.
Yes. Yeah. We don't have to get stuck inside of the box. Get rid of the box already, you guys. Come on. Just break it apart. Open yourself up. So Silly Lily did have one more question.
Great. I was going to say, before we close, let's have another question from Silly Lily.
So would you say that triangulated areas in Alaska, Bermuda, etc., are vortexed?
Oh, gosh. Well, again, vortexes are everywhere. The Alaska Triangle, it's a bit of a more complicated question because there's certainly global grid points, and I happen to have been pretty close to the one that's in the Gulf of Alaska, and man, I definitely felt it and felt healed by it. And that's a little bit of a longer story, but there are triangles. There's Alaska triangles, but maybe not the one that's popularized. Again, if I'm going to see a triangle, I want it to make sense to me. It's going to be an equilateral triangle, or it's going to be a 3, 4, 5 triangle for various reasons. There's going to be something about this triangle. Is it an isosceles triangle? Does it have an invert triangle that's like its complement, making like a pattern of 6-pointed star? Is it related to, I'm wanting a confirmation. It's not enough for me to have 3 points. That'd be pointless. It's like saying these 3 points line up. That's not enough. We've got to know that it's a certain number of points over a very short distance. Now maybe we've got an alignment. So there's a deep meaning to myth, and things don't have to be exactly accurate for things to be meaningful and to give meaning to your place. But again, I'm trying to merge both polarities. I've had this miraculous experiences, and I'm wanting, what's the science behind this? And it's one thing to say, well, this place has an energy, but to find these geometric patterns, it's almost incontrovertible. Why are these geometric patterns occurring? Well, geometric patterns occur everywhere in nature. We see them everywhere. We see them at planet-wide scale, and not just at the molecular scale. And so hopefully this helps us to be more connected to our place, feel that sense of unity, go out there and do the ceremony and help enliven the earth, and that enlivens us and enriches us, and that it moves us towards the inevitable completion of our spiritual lessons.
Well, and I think from where I am, that is the goal for me, is to move up to the higher mental planes of understanding. Most people, don't even know that there's higher planes of understanding out there. This is why we're talking about this kind of stuff today, guys, is to open this, door. Whether you move through the door and you want to take those steps, that's up to your personal preference. But understanding that the energy, frequency, vibration with our bodies, with our plants, with our animals, are all mixed together. We can't have one without the other. I talked about the predator prey. The predator prey works in energetic as well. The positive, the negative, the neutral, it all interacts just like everything else around us. And we're here to experience it. And Dan had mentioned before the animals and the plants have more sensory perception than we do. They've found plants have over 7, I think it was 9 now or something like that. They see the color of your shirt when you go into the garden, guys. Okay. That's how much sensory perception the plants have. The elephants, I didn't know that they had that sensory perception in their feet, but think of the whales. This is how they communicate, is by sound waves, by frequency, by energy, by vibration. It is it's so easy for me to personally see it because that's how I look at the world. But for most people, you need to accept that these energies flow. That's why we talk about grounding. We talk about, dawn and dusk, feeding yourself, looking at the sun with the energy that comes from the sun gazers. There's real science behind these things now that we didn't have 10 years or 20 or 30 or 40 years ago. But I'll tell you, everybody remembers the commercial with the 2 eggs frying on the pan going, this is your brain on drugs. The marketing aspect has been drilled deep. We've got to break that cycle and go to Dan's website, go to thevortex.com, look at the books, read them, start to understand, allow yourself to open up to the possibilities that exist in time, space, and our reality right now. Dan?
Wow. Thank you so much. Vortexmaps.com.
Okay, I want to make sure I get that back up. I know that you do have more social media than I've been supplying. You go to the website, scroll down the very bottom, because they're all listed across the bottom, guys. But there's a lot more for you to learn from Dan. And we're going to have Dan back on, definitely with Leighton Morrison on the Soil Matters. And I'm going to get Sucker Stefan Burns into coming on. And we're going to bring these 2 guys together because I'd love to just sit back and listen to you guys. I know it's going to be an amazing conversation.
Well, it's been a real pleasure. I look forward to spending more time and with you, and everybody spend more time in your garden and with the trees. That's what it's all about.
You bet. Dan, stick around. We'll talk after the show. But guys, tomorrow we've got, of course, myself with Andy Lopez, the Invisible Gardener. And that's another guy Dan should talk to because I think you guys would have some really interesting stories you guys could tell. But guys, that's tomorrow's show, and we'll talk to you then. Other than that, I love you all. Have a wonderful day, guys.